Hey guys, tonight we slip into the folds of your pocket. Yes, that lint-filled cave of crumbs and half-folded receipts and pull out something so ordinary you probably don't even glance at it anymore, the US dollar bill. But this isn't just paper. It's a time machine, a war story, and an artistic conspiracy all rolled into one. You're about to crawl backward through centuries of coinless chaos and wobbly ideas that somehow evolved into one of the most powerful pieces of paper on Earth. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this timeline with your financial dignity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always want to know where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the American colonies, but this isn't the powdered wig Independence Day flavored version, you know. It's muddier, smellier. You clutch a handful of, well, squirrel pelts. Or maybe it's wampum beads. Or a crumpled Spanish reel with a king's profile halfway rubbed off. The year is 1690, and honestly nobody agrees on what money even is today. Welcome to the economic Wild West before the West even got wild. In Massachusetts, you're handed something revolutionary: paper money. Printed by the colony, backed by nothing but trust and a vague promise to repay. It's supposed to help pay for military expeditions against the French in Canada. You look at it, touch it. It's flimsy, in more ways than one. Still, it catches on. Sort of. But here's the mess: each colony starts printing its own notes in different sizes. Colors, values, even languages. Virginia uses tobacco receipts. South Carolina tries rice. Pennsylvania flirts with Benjamin Franklin's clever anti-counterfeiting leaf designs. Yes, leaf as in tree. You, dear listener, are now a broke time traveler with a wallet full of monopoly money no one agrees on. Historians still argue whether the colony's constant experimentation with currency was brilliant innovation or economic toddlerhood. One thing's for sure: walking into a tavern with your wallet was like showing up to a board game night with cards from 10 different decks and hoping someone calls it legal tender. And don't forget, this was before America even became a thing. You're still under British rule, and King George is not impressed. The crown clamps down hard. You peasants are making fake money. How adorable. Parliament passes the Currency Acts banning the colonies from issuing paper notes. You're forced back to trading coins or chickens if you're short on silver. The thing is, coins are scarce. Most precious metals are hoarded, sent back to Europe, or just lost in someone's outhouse. So colonists get creative. You trudge through a market in Rhode Island where someone tries to buy rum with musket balls. Somewhere in New Jersey, you see a land deed being sliced into quarters and used to buy flour. Meanwhile, a fur trapper in upstate New York insists that a raccoon pelt is worth 2 shillings. And a kiss on the cheek. You decline. Here's your quirky tidbit: in some New England towns you could literally pay your taxes in fish. Cod specifically. Imagine walking up to the town hall with a dripping sack of haddock and calling it your civic duty. Eventually the colonies realize this chaos won't cut it. But they're also deeply stubborn and terrified of centralized control. No one wants a national bank yet. They just want whatever's easiest to carry and won't rot in their pockets by springtime. And you trying to buy a tin cup of cider with a mix of tobacco receipts, half a Spanish reel, and someone else's IOU are politely asked to leave the bar. As night falls over colonial Boston, you tuck your various currencies into a ragged pouch. Above you, a full moon rises over a land, still searching for its value not just in money but in identity. Each bill, each coin, each failed experiment is a whisper of what's coming. A louder, more determined attempt to shape a national symbol out of ink paper and stubborn dreams. You feel it in your bones, even if your squirrel pelt says otherwise. The story of the dollar bill has barely begun. You wake to shouting. Angry shouting. Political shouting. The kind that echoes off wooden beams and sloshes your drink before you can sip it. You found yourself in the early 1770s, just in time for the colonies to throw their powdered wig rebellion into full gear. No more kings, no more redcoats, no more being told your fake money isn't real money. The American colonies are pissed, united, and about to declare independence. But revolutions, as it turns out, are expensive, and gold is a little hard to carry into battle. So someone has a brilliant probably doomed idea, let's print our own national money. Enter the Hofstadtstaat, Continental Congress. Fresh with revolutionary vibes and zero economic experience. In 1775, just weeks after Lexington and Concord, they authorized the first continental currency. You're handed one hot off the press crisp, weirdly beautiful and only mildly confusing. It says, the United Colonies across the top. The value 10 Spanish milled dollars. Because yes, they still have to reference someone else's money to explain their own. But it feels bold. The ink smells of rebellion. And right on the front, a fierce design, maybe a sundial with the motto, mind your business. Benjamin Franklin's cheeky idea, of course. Or perhaps you've got one with an exploding cannon or a chained serpent. It's not subtle. The colonies want Britain to know we're broke, but we're dangerous. You tuck the bill into your coat and step onto the muddy battlefield of American finance. Here's the reality: continental money is printed in bulk to fund the revolution. And we mean bulk. By 1779, Congress has printed over $240 million in paper notes. That's a lot of money for an economy that runs mostly on barter and hope. Soon your crisp bill becomes less valuable than the paper it's printed on. Inflation hits like spoiled cider. One day you can buy a wool hat. 2 weeks later, the same hat costs a whole wheelbarrow of bills, and you still need to tip the shopkeeper in buttons or flattery. Soldiers complain they're being paid in ghost money. Some start burning it for warmth. Here's a quirky detail for you. Counterfeiting became so rampant that the British printed fake continental currency and deliberately dropped it behind enemy lines just to cause economic sabotage. Imagine that. A nation founded in part by one of the world's first viral scams. Benjamin Franklin, who helped design many of the early notes, tried to fight the counterfeiters with an unusual weapon leaf patterns. He pressed real leaves into the printing plates, creating impossibly intricate designs no one could easily copy. You trace one with your finger, it's from a maple tree still sharp after 200 years. Still, it wasn't enough. Historians still argue whether the failure of continental currency was a fatal flaw or a necessary lesson. Some say it undermined faith in paper money for decades. Others claim it bought just enough time, just enough cannons, boots, and bullets to win the war. You sit in a quiet Philadelphia tavern and watch as someone wipes their mouth with a $5 note. No one even flinches. The dollar has become something of a joke, a cruel, crumpled souvenir from a fight no one was sure they'd win. But it's not the end. The war ends. The British leave. And now you're stuck in a brand new country with no king, no central bank, and no trusted money. A new government stumbles into existence, terrified of recreating the kind of economic tyranny they just escaped. So naturally, they decide to do nothing. For years, states are allowed to issue their own currencies again. Merchants refuse to take paper. Banks hoard gold. Everyone clutches Spanish coins like they're sacred relics. You spend a few weeks trying to buy apples with a mishmash of copper tokens and French coins and something called shin plasters. Small privately issued paper notes that sound like medical devices. You're dizzy, and so is the economy. Then in a twist of irony, you notice something. Some folks are still holding on to their old continental notes. Not because they're worth anything, but because they represent something. A moment when America tried and failed to define itself. The ink is fading, but the ambition still hums beneath it. That ambition doesn't die. It mutates. You hear whispers of a young treasury clerk, ambitious, brilliant, a little too smug, who wants to give paper money another shot. But first, he'll need to convince a nervous, cash-poor nation that centralized finance isn't just tyranny in a nicer wig. And you fold one last battered continental note and tuck it into your coat like a warning, or maybe a promise. This paper might have failed, but the idea behind it, one bill to bind a nation, won't go away. Not yet. You blink and the tavern is gone. In its place stands a marble-columned building with a brass plaque gleaming in the sun, Bank of North America. It's 1781 and you're now deep in the aftershocks of war. The United States is free, but financially flatlined. The continental dollar. A bad memory. No one will touch it. Commerce is fractured, debt is everywhere, and soldiers are being paid in promises. You shuffle down the cobbled street in search of something, anything that might work as currency. A butcher in New Jersey hands you a greasy IOU. A farmer in Delaware accepts only whiskey or nails. And if you're really unlucky, you'll have to haggle using land deeds marbles or the universal backup chickens. Enter the idea of a national currency again. But this time, the founders have learned their lesson. Sort of. This is the era of cautious optimism and long, bitter arguments, mostly about whether the federal government should be allowed anywhere near people's wallets. Still whispers about fiat money creep back into the national mood. No, not the Italian car. We're talking about currency backed by nothing but the government's word. The phrase alone sends shivers down many spines. You walk through the halls of Congress, which smell faintly of ink and stress, and hear the debates. Should we ever print money again? Can we trust ourselves not to mess it up? Historians still argue whether this hesitation was smart fiscal responsibility or economic paralysis. But either way, for now, no one's printing anything new. The Founding Fathers are content to let private banks and local governments muddle through with their own systems. Meanwhile, you find yourself holding a mishmash of currencies. British pounds still circulate, Spanish milled dollars remain the gold standard ironically, and there's even French currency slipping around souvenirs from Lafayette's army. None of it is American. Not really. Then in a moment of paper-fueled boldness, the Bank of North America, essentially America's first central bank, starts issuing notes of its own. You're handed one trembling slightly. It looks official, and it's backed by actual silver. Could this be progress? Sort of. Because here's the catch, most people don't trust it. After the continental dollar debacle, public faith in paper money is shattered. Farmers reject it. Merchants frown, soldiers laugh, and private banks? Oh, they really don't like someone else printing better money. Here's a strange tidbit for your collection. Some local banks purposely designed their notes to resemble the notes of more trusted institutions, down to mimicking fonts and paper texture, just to trick people into accepting them. It was legal. Barely. You sit in a sweltering Virginia parlor as someone explains to you the idea of specie. Hard currency, gold, silver, real heavy shiny stuff. Everyone wants it, no one has it. And no one's parting with it unless you're selling land, or possibly your soul. As time drags through the 1780s, the states dig into their own weird monetary habits again. Massachusetts tries to standardize coins. New York flirts with land-backed notes, and North Carolina, bless its heart, experiments with issuing money for moral improvement purposes. You can almost smell the disaster. There's a creeping awareness that something must change. That eventually someone will need to wrangle all these chaotic systems into something coherent. But who? That question finds its answer not in the countryside, but in the bustling thundercloud mind of one man. Alexander Hamilton. But don't get ahead of yourself, he's not in power yet. At this point in your journey, he's still the former aide-de-camp, writing his economic theories on parchment by candlelight, and dreaming of national banks and balanced ledgers like they're bedtime stories. One evening you spot a street vendor in Philadelphia who's accepting anything as payment buttons. Dutch guilders even promises of hay delivery. You ask him what he thinks of national paper money. He shrugs. If it buys bread, I'll take it. If not, burn it. And honestly, that's the mood. You end your evening counting coins under the dim glow of an oil lamp. Each one from a different place. Each with a different symbol. Different weight, different story. Your fingers are stained with metal, your pouch heavy, and your patience thin. The dollar hasn't been born yet, not really. It's a ghost and idea waiting in the wings. But it's coming. Because as it turns out, America can't keep limping along on patchwork currencies and patriotic IOUs forever. In a few short years, the young nation will decide that to unite states, it must first unite their money. You'll be there when it happens, watching ink dry on a bill that finally dares to say, this is what a dollar looks like. But for now, you sit beside the fire bills and coins scattered around you like puzzle pieces. One dream has died. The next hasn't quite begun. High Misty, word count 1070. You hear him before you see him. Footsteps deliberate, polished, confident. Then the quiet swish of tailored fabric. You glance up and there he is brushing past the candlelit desks of the new Treasury Department like he owns the place. Which in spirit he sort of does. Alexander Hamilton, the human spreadsheet. It's 1790 now, and the US government is barely crawling through its toddler years. Everything is messy, debts laws, states refusing to cooperate, and most of all, the complete lack of a consistent currency. But Hamilton, he's had enough of all that. You follow him as he sketches out a vision so bold it makes the powdered wigs tingle. His idea is centralized economy, a national bank, a uniform currency, and yep, you guessed it, a proper US dollar. The man doesn't just want order, he wants prestige. He wants America's money to carry weight literally and symbolically. No more raccoon pelts and part-time tobacco notes. He wants shiny coins, printed bills, and a structure so solid it would make European bankers blink in slow respect. And that's how you land at the feet of the Pike First Bank of the United States. Chartered in 1791, it looks like a cross between a Greek temple and a marble promise. You step inside and inhale ink ambition and the faint metallic tang of future wealth. This is where the real dollar is born. For the first time, the US officially defines its currency. $1 will be equivalent to 371.5 grains of pure silver. It's a hyper-specific number. Yes, but remember, Hamilton was the kind of guy who probably alphabetized his breakfast. Coins are minted. The first few dollar coins shimmer in your hand, Lady Liberty on one side and Eagle on the other. They're heavy, solid, symbolic. The minting starts in Philadelphia, and if you squint, you can see the pride in the engraver's face as he strikes that first die. This isn't just metal, it's identity. But wait, why not? Paper didn't Hamilton believe in credit and finance and the wonders of banking? He did. But even he knew after the continental currency debacle, paper money still feels radioactive. So, for now, coins are the safe bet. Still, paper lingers like a ghost in the corner. Private banks start issuing their own notes again, some with Hamilton's approval, others without. You pick up a handful. Some are engraved masterpieces. Others look like they were made by a drunk calligrapher with a shaky printing press. Each one promises to pay the bearer on demand, but the fine print might as well say, good luck. Here's a weird little fact. Many early US banknotes didn't even picture presidents. Instead, they featured scenes of mythological figures, trains, factories, farm girls, or just random animals. Somewhere someone definitely paid for groceries with a $10 bill covered in goats. You sit on a bench outside the first bank and watch the future swirl around you. Merchants cautiously accept the new coins. Farmers grumble about debts. Southern states eye the system with suspicion, muttering about too much power in the North. Even Thomas Jefferson grits his teeth from Monticello, deeply unsettled by Hamilton's financial wizardry. Historians still argue whether Hamilton's model was genius or dangerously centralized. Some say it saved the Republic. Others claim it sowed the seeds of future inequality. You're just trying to pay for coffee with something that isn't a shoelace and a promise. Eventually, you visit a store in New York, where the shopkeeper pulls open a drawer and reveals a neat little row. Spanish coins, US coins, a few battered English pennies, and one oddly crisp note from a local bank in Albany. I'll take whatever won't get me yelled at by customers, he says. Fair enough. By the late 1790s, the dollar is real, but it's still young. It hasn't reached the paper confidence we know today. Coins are bulky, banks are regional, paper is private, and the government's still nervous about printing anything that might look like funny money. So instead you get a strange hybrid economy. Government coins plus private banknotes plus lingering barter. America is trying to act like a grown-up nation, but it's still very much dressing in borrowed clothes. You watch Hamilton one last time as he signs papers late into the night. He's laying groundwork for a system that could survive wars, crises, even the collapse of entire markets. You suspect he knows he won't live to see how it all turns out. Still, he pushes on sharp quill, scratching across parchment like a man writing with time itself breathing down his neck. And as you step outside into the gaslit Philadelphia dusk, you clutch a freshly minted dollar coin and whisper to it just to see if it answers. It doesn't, but it hums. You wake up to cannon fire. Not aimed at you, thankfully, but echoing over green hills in the distance. The year is 1862, and the United States is at war with itself. The air smells like gunpowder and wet wool, and somewhere nearby a telegraph clicks out casualty reports like a death metronome. You step cautiously into a Washington, D.C. that's more chaos than Capitol. The Union is running out of everything guns, boots, coffee, soldiers, and most of all, money. Real, hard, spendable money. And this is where it happens. This is when America, desperate and bleeding, finally returns to paper money. Not private banknotes, not silver IOUs, but honest-to-goodness government-issued bills. Greenbacks. You pick one up fresh off the press at the Treasury's Bureau of Engraving. It's odd-looking, tinted faint green, thus the nickname, and unlike anything you've seen before, it doesn't say it's backed by gold or silver. Nope. It just says, "This note is legal tender for all debts public and private," which is a polite way of saying, please trust us. We're busy fighting a war right now. President Lincoln signed the das Legal Tender Act. In 1862, allowing the government to print fiat currency for the first time in decades. And just like that, the US dollar becomes an unbacked promise carried on the tide of national emergency. The bills you're handed don't feel like coins. They don't clink. They don't weigh much, but they move faster than metal ever could. With each skirmish, each cannon blast, thousands more greenbacks flood the streets. Some are used to pay troops. Others buy uniforms, feed prisoners, or bribe Southern spies. You walk through a Union camp where soldiers debate whether to spend or burn the new bills. One man folds his into paper bullets for his musket. Another insists they'll be worth a fortune one day. You eye a campfire and watch greenbacks tossed in as kindling. War, it seems, does strange things to money. Strange things. Historians still argue whether the greenbacks were economic salvation or financial betrayal. Some say they saved the Union. Others claim they unleashed a century of inflationary sins. But in the moment, none of that matters. What matters is that people accept them. Barely. Here's your quirky fact of the night. During the Civil War, people distrusted paper money so much that photographs of gold coins were printed in newspapers. Just to remind folks what actual money looked like. Imagine scrolling through Instagram and seeing close-up shots of quarters with the caption, "Yakshanidan Throwback Thursday to when money was shiny." And then there's the counterfeiting. Oh boy. With the flood of greenbacks came a tidal wave of fake ones. You peer into a smoky Chicago basement where a gang of counterfeiters operate like evil artisans. Hand-engraved plates, stolen treasury paper, and ink mixed in bathtubs. One gang prints $1 million in fakes before breakfast, and they're not even the worst of it. The government scrambles. A new agency is born. The Secret Service. Originally created not to protect presidents, but to hunt counterfeiters. You watch as a fresh-faced agent tips his hat and examines a forged note under lamplight. His eyes squint. His jaw tightens. He mutters, "This one's almost perfect." You lean closer. So do 1,000 other merchants, bankers, and everyday citizens. Every bill is suspect. No one trusts anyone. It's the economic version of a whispering match. But through all this, the dollar does something unexpected. It endures. Greenbacks survive the war. They're still floating around after Appomattox, even though many were never supposed to last that long. And slowly, stubbornly, they become part of everyday life. Eventually, the US government faces a moral hangover. What now? Redeem all the greenbacks with gold. Trash them, reissue new notes. The arguments rage in courtrooms and on editorial pages. A Supreme Court case even challenges whether the greenbacks were constitutional. The verdict: yes, they're legal tender. Yes, they're. So for better or worse, you're living in a post-greenback America. Money no longer needs to be shiny, it just needs to work. You walk through a train station and hand a conductor a wrinkled 10. He doesn't blink, just tucks it in his vest and waves you through. Something has shifted. Paper money isn't just emergency rations anymore. It's becoming the norm. By the 1870s, new series of bills begin to emerge: United States notes. National bank notes, all bearing the growing fingerprints of bureaucracy. You notice the design's intricate borders, serious-looking men in oval portraits, and a deepening green hue that seems to say, "You can trust this." Really? Still, you pass by a farmer in Ohio who keeps gold coins buried in his yard just in case. Old habits die hard. The Civil War might be over, but its legacy is forever inked into the DNA of the dollar. You fold a battered greenback into your pocket and walk into the quiet aftermath of war where peace is shaky. Progress is fragile and money is evolving into something bigger than anyone ever expected. You wander into the late 1800s where the air smells like industry iron rails, coal smoke, and ambition. America is growing faster than it can explain itself. Trains roar across the plains, telegraphs click like metallic crickets, and factories churn out everything from hats to handguns. The economy booming and confusing. You stop outside a large stone building with armed guards on the steps and a rickety wooden sign hanging above the door. First National Bank of... somewhere. You step inside. A clerk squints at you through wire-rimmed glasses and hands you a crisp bills memorable et National Bank note. It looks official. But then again, so do the dozen other bills in your coat pocket. Each has a different name, design, color, and slightly varied size. Welcome to the United States banking system, 1880s edition. A complete glorious mess. Here's how it works. Or doesn't. Since the Civil War, thousands of private banks accounted across the country have been authorized to issue their own notes, each one backed by government bonds held in Washington. The logic: decentralized paper, federally regulated. A compromise between wildcat banking and total federal control. But here's the kicker: these banks use different engraving companies. So each note looks completely different. Some feature presidents, some mythical figures, others a lady harvesting corn, or a random child petting a goat. You fan out a handful of banknotes. One says, "The First Bank of Kansas City." Another, "The Lumberman's Bank of Wisconsin." You even find one from the Farmers and Drovers Bank. You're starting to suspect someone named the banks after what they saw out the window. And oh yes, and counterfeiters love this. You step into a seedy printing shop in Ohio, where a man named Big Elmer is carving a fake note plate with an old dental tool. His dog is asleep on a pile of blank bills. He grins, hands you a perfect fake 20 and says, "Don't spend it too close to home." It's no surprise. By the 1860s and 70s, nearly 1 in 3 bills in circulation is counterfeit. 1 in 3. That means every time you buy an apple, you might be paying with someone's basement masterpiece. Historians still argue whether this era of wild note variation created confidence through local pride or chaos through visual overload. Either way, people start getting paranoid. Merchants keep counterfeit detectors under their counters, thick books that show every known legitimate note design. And you, dear listener, find yourself checking each bill against grainy woodcuts in a manual the size of a phone book. All just to buy a sandwich. Quirky fact incoming: some counterfeiters got so good. They didn't fake individual notes, they faked entire banks. Set up a fake branch, print notes, close the branch. Poof. You're now holding a $20 receipt from a bank that never existed. Early finance was basically a Scooby-Doo villain with a printing press. To fight back, the Treasury steps up its game. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing begins to standardize designs. You watch as new printing presses humming, clicking, breathing like mechanical dragons, churn out notes with tiny, mind-numbing details, guilloche patterns, micro-lettering, intricate portraits. A headache for forgers, a thrill for collectors. You visit the printing room and are immediately dizzy with detail. There's a guy whose job is literally just checking if George Washington's eyebrow is 1 ink hair too thick. This is precision warfare. And then there's the backplate engraver. Arguably the most sleep-deprived man in America. His designs look like hypnotic spiderwebs made to confuse your eye and trap counterfeiters in endless looping lines. Even so, the war on fakes is never ending. That's why in 1865 the Treasury formalizes the Secret Service. Not to protect presidents, that comes later, but to go full detective mode on counterfeiters. You follow an early agent through dingy basements and cigar smoke saloons where suspects are caught by comparing ink stains and paper fibers. It's not glamorous, it's obsessive, and weirdly effective. Still, no amount of law enforcement can solve the biggest problem: trust. People don't trust what they can't recognize. And since each note is basically an art project from a different town, commerce suffers. You witness an argument in a general store where a woman from Minnesota tries to use a Michigan banknote. The shopkeeper holds it up to the light, squints, and declares, "This might be a drawing of a turkey or a hat." Either way, I don't take it. Frustrating, yes. Funny, kinda. Fixable soon. But for now, you walk down the street clutching a handful of legal banknotes that might not work 3 towns over. You feel the weight not of money, but of possibility. America is stretching its limbs, growing too fast for its own good, and its dollar bills are trying to keep up. Each one you hold is different, but they all whisper the same question. What if we could agree on just one design, one system? $1 to rule them all. Soon that dream will take shape. But first, the country has a few more counterfeit crises, design disasters, and money-based mysteries to stumble through. Welcome to the Treasury's Wild West. You're standing in a cramped room filled with paint fumes, nervous sketch artists, and government men arguing about ears. Welcome to the late 1800s, when America decides that maybe, just maybe, its money should actually look official, clean, reverent, maybe even a little majestic. And the first thing they try to fix, the faces. By now you've seen it all: goats on 5s, winged babies on 20s, sad farmers cradling corn on 10s. But in a post-Civil War country desperate to stitch itself back together, it's time for some consistency. And that consistency, presidential, stoic, bald. Behold the rise of the puffwut. Portrait note. You reach into your pocket and pull out a U.S. bill. There he is. Abraham Lincoln. Gazing slightly to the left like he's reading a tragic haiku. His hair is wild, his eyes are tired, and his beard. Probably the most iconic whiskers in finance. But why Lincoln? Well, in 1869, he becomes one of the first presidents to appear on U.S. currency, posthumously. His assassination just 4 years earlier shocked the nation. Putting him on a bill wasn't just symbolic, it was healing. Like saying, this is who we are now. We survive. Soon more faces follow. Washington, Hamilton, Grant, Jackson. Each one carefully selected to communicate strength, stability, and don't you dare counterfeit me. But the choices aren't always smooth. Historians still argue whether some of these early portraits were based more on politics than legacy. For example, Salmon P. Chase. A former Treasury Secretary literally put his own face on the $1 bill while in office. Yes, really. Imagine designing a national currency and thinking, you know who people want to see me. Eventually he's removed, but not before making financial narcissism an oddly enduring trend. You step into the Bureau of Engraving where an artist is hunched over a steel plate, the size of a dinner napkin, carving microscopic lines with monk-like focus. He's etching in George Washington, whose face will soon grace the new Yaditiye 1 silver certificate. The Model A famous Gilbert Stuart portrait from 1796, one so iconic that you've seen it 1,000 times without realizing you've never actually looked at it. Washington isn't smiling. He looks vaguely concerned, like he just remembered he left his dentures in a tavern. The artists debate everything. Should George face left or right? Should he wear a military uniform? Should his hair look powdered? One engraver proposes drawing him without the frilly collar. Another almost punches him. Meanwhile, the public gets increasingly obsessed with faces on money. Some love the patriotism, others find it creepy. Rumors begin to swirl. You overhear a woman at a train station whisper that Lincoln's eyes move if you stare long enough. Someone else claims Jefferson's portrait glows under moonlight. Quirky tidbit. In the 1870s, a counterfeit bill circulated with Santa Claus is on it, yes, full beard, Big red coat, bag of toys. No one's entirely sure why, but it proves one thing people will accept. Anyone must be on a banknote if it buys eggs. You explore the new lineup. On the 10, Andrew Jackson eyes, brooding like a man who definitely punched someone at breakfast. On the 20, Grover Cleveland, who looks like your disapproving uncle. By the 1920s, the trend locks and American money becomes a rotating hall of fame for dead presidents, founding fathers, and the occasional Supreme Court justice. But here's the strange part. The Miu designs still vary wildly. You pick up a $5 bill from 1896, and it's breathtaking. A neoclassical painting of Ytioida electricity as a floating goddess handing light to mankind. On a banknote. It's not just currency, it's an art museum in your back pocket. This was part of the Bidyayinomite educational series. A wildly ambitious and expensive set of bills from the US Treasury. Each one was meant to be both a teaching tool and a flex. Look how cultured we are. But that didn't last. Too intricate. Too easy to damage. And let's be honest, too expensive to keep printing. By the 1930s, simpler designs take over fewer allegorical goddesses, more crisp frames, and safer portraits. Less Louvre, more DMV. Still, the core idea remains faces mean trust, recognition, patriotism. These portraits become icons. You don't just see Lincoln, you feel him. You know the angle of his nose better than you know your cousin's birthday. And slowly, unintentionally, America becomes a country where money is memory. You step into a barber shop and notice a child clutching a dollar inspecting George Washington's chin like it holds secrets. Down the block, a shopkeeper counts bills so fast it's like muscle memory. No one says the names, but the faces are sacred. The government even bans living people from appearing on currency after that whole Chase incident. It becomes a rule only the dead may reign in your wallet. And so the tradition deepens. The dollar becomes a gallery of national ghosts, each silently shaping how you think about value, identity, and history itself. As you walk down the street, your pocket buzzes not from technology, but from meaning. You carry presidents, generals, thinkers, each one blinking out from paper, like a dusty photograph from a war you forgot you studied. They're not just faces, they're anchors. And like it or not, they've come to stay. You're on a train. Not a sleek bullet of modern steel, but a steam-belching, soot-smudged beast, rumbling across the 1910s American countryside. As it lurches forward, so does the nation industry's boom cities swell in money. Well, money gets weird. Because now there's too much of it. Not in your wallet, of course. You're still trying to buy coffee with a crumpled silver certificate and a wink. But in the system, it's chaos. By this point, there are thousands of private banks issuing their own paper notes. National bank notes, silver certificates, gold certificates, treasury notes. Each looks slightly different. Each has a different promise stamped on its face. Redeemable in gold, payable on demand, backed by silver. You start needing a glossary just to pay for socks. And then something breaks. It's Mahat's 7. And you find yourself standing in front of a bank in New York. People are screaming, doors are locked. A banker is wiping sweat from his brow as customers pound on the glass demanding their money. You've arrived at the panic of 1907. One of the worst financial meltdowns in American history. Why? Because trust once again has evaporated. A big firm collapses. Investors panic. Other banks freeze up like scared cats. The stock market plummets. And since there's no central authority to calm things down, the entire economy teeters on the edge of a pit. You step over a man who just tried to redeem a note for silver, only to be told the bank ran out of silver. He's now holding a very expensive bookmark. Historians still argue whether this panic was inevitable or just the result of unchecked speculation. But it sparks one clear conclusion across both parties. We need a grown-up in the room. Someone or something to manage money, stabilize the system, and make sure the entire economy doesn't collapse every time a banker sneezes. Enter the Federal Reserve System. 1913. You watch as Congress, after years of shouting, finally agrees to create a central bank. Not just a vault, not just a loan center, but a full-blown institution with the power to control interest rates, supply cash, And most crucially, issue Federal Reserve notes. That's right. The dollar bill as you know it today is about to be born. The idea is radical. Instead of 1,000 banks all printing their own designs, the Federal Reserve will now handle everything. One note, one issuer, one set of standards. You're handed the first edition of a Federal Reserve note. In 1914, it's beautiful. Standardized, clear, and comforting in a way that only math and order can be. The same across every state, every town. If it says $10, it means $10, no small-town banker's promise attached. Gone are the goats and farm girls. In come the serious faces and hard lines of federal authority. But here's the weird bit, the early Fed notes don't replace all the old bills immediately. Instead, for a time, they coexist. You open your wallet and it's like attending a family reunion where no one gets along. Silver certificates are still legal, so are national banknotes. Treasury notes, gold certificates, United States notes. It's a paper party and everyone brought their own font. Quirky tidbit for tonight, some denominations printed in this era were massive. Ever held a $10,000 bill? You could back then. It featured Salmon P. Chase. Yes, the same guy who once put his own face on the $1 staring out from a note so big no one ever saw it outside a bank vault. It was used only for interbank transfers like Venmo for giants. Meanwhile, the public adapts, slowly, suspiciously. You hear an old man in Missouri mutter that he doesn't trust these new Fed bills and he'll take silver or nothing. But over time, the standard note becomes the norm. Federal Reserve notes spread like wildfire, clean, uniform, dependable. And here's something you notice, they all say Federal Reserve note. Across the top. Not gold certificate, not redeemable in silver, just the note itself. This marks a turning point. No more promises of precious metals, no more payable in coin. Now the bill is the value. It doesn't point to gold in a vault. It is the vault. It says this is money, because we said so, and because you believe it. You sit in a diner in 1921 and watch as a waitress counts your change. All Fed notes, no confusion, no counterfeit detectors, just paper and trust. It feels eerie, like everyone's agreed to pretend the emperor has clothes, and weirdly the clothes are working. But the system still has cracks. The Fed is new. The dollar is stable but fragile. And in a few short years, that fragility will be tested in a way that makes 1907 look like a paper cut. Because looming on the horizon, invisible but certain, is a storm the Fed can't stop. A financial reckoning that will rattle the foundations of capitalism itself. For now, though, you sit on the train once again. The country hums with industry. The dollar is stronger than ever. But you can't shake the feeling that something is about to give. And when it does, the dollar will be tested like never before. You jolt awake in 1929. The air feels off too quiet. A thick, sour tension clings to the buildings. You walk down Wall Street just as the shouting begins. First one broker, then 10, then 100. People swarm like bees escaping a kicked hive. You hear the words over and over. The market's gone. Sell everything. It's all paper. Welcome to Black Tuesday. The day the stock market collapses and yanks the rug out from under the roaring 1920s. You step aside as bankers sprint from one building to another waving papers like firemen with empty hoses. Phones ring endlessly. Typewriters clack like machine guns. Everyone's trying to stop a flood with words, and no one can. Just days ago, the dollar was the king of the world, backed by gold, flanked by growing industry, and carried in fur coats and whiskey-lined wallets. Now, it's a leaf in a hurricane. Within hours, fortunes vanish. Banks close their doors. Families line up outside soup kitchens. And the dollar, so recently a symbol of unstoppable prosperity, suddenly feels vulnerable. You hold a crumpled 10 in your hand, and for the first time in years, it doesn't feel powerful. It feels scared. Historians still argue whether the Federal Reserve failed by doing too little or too much. But what no one argues is this: the Great Depression reshaped American money forever. In the early 1930s, you walk through a landscape of financial ruins. Farmers burn crops they can't sell. People trade goods against shoes for bread apples for thread. You see will work for food signs outside steel plants. The dollar hasn't disappeared, but its meaning has cracked. And then comes Franklin Delano Roosevelt. With his slow smile and fast pen, he launches the New Deal. A sweeping plan to yank the economy out of the ditch, and right in the middle of it, a bold, controversial, and for some unthinkable move. He takes the dollar off the gold standard. Well, sort of. Here's what happens in 1933. FDR signs Executive Order 6102, making it illegal for U.S. citizens to own large amounts of gold coins, bullion, or certificates. You walk into a post office and see people handing over gold eagles in small velvet pouches, family heirlooms traded for paper bills. Why? Because the government wants to take control of the money supply. If people can demand gold in exchange for paper, then the Fed's hands are tied. But if paper is all there is, they can increase or decrease the supply as needed. So you watch as entire vaults of gold shift from private hands to Fort Knox. Gold certificates vanish. The fine print on bills changes. What once read redeemable in gold on demand now reads something closer to just trust us, please. And most people do. Not because they love it, but because they're too tired not to. Quirky fact, some folks tried to get clever with the gold recall. One man mailed his gold coins to friends in Canada. Another buried his beneath a chicken coop, hoping the government wouldn't search there. Rumors swirl of jars hidden in walls under floorboards inside hollowed-out books. America becomes a treasure map overnight. But even without gold, the dollar survives. The silver certificates remain for a while, still promising shiny metal, but you can see the writing on the wall. The future is fiat. The paper is the value. And by mid-decade, most Americans aren't asking what backs their dollar. They're just relieved it still buys bread. You wander through Washington, D.C., past FDR's fireside chats crackling through radios where his calm voice sells confidence like a potion. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. You look down at the dollar in your hand. It's no longer tied to gold, but somehow it still feels tied to something bigger, national unity maybe. Or sheer stubborn hope. And then just as things seem to stabilize, the world ignites. World War into us. Drags the nation into another global crisis, but this time, oddly, it saves the economy. You see factories roar back to life. Unemployment vanishes, wages rise. War bonds sell by the billions. And the dollar becomes even the world's most wanted currency. By 1944, you're sitting at a grand table in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Listening to economists from 44 allied nations agree on one thing. Let's peg the world's currencies to the US dollar. Not gold, not silver. The dollar say saya swine. Because at this point, the United States owns most of the world's gold anyway. So by default, the dollar becomes the anchor. If your country wants to play in the post-war economy, you need US currency. This isn't just economic policy, it's global monetary diplomacy in a suit and tie. You watch as the dollar goes from domestic survivor to international superstar. It becomes the measuring stick for yen, francs, pounds, and pesos. America doesn't just mint money, it mints the rules. But deep down, something's changed. The dollar is no longer about shiny coins or redemption at a window. It's about belief. A shared story. A leap of faith that if everyone agrees the bill is worth $10, it is. You hold one up to the sun. No glitter, no gold thread. Just inkling in history and an invisible whisper. This is power if you believe it is. You step out into a brand new world. It's the 1950s now. America is victorious, booming, and flush with confidence. Suburbs bloom like concrete flowers. Elvis is shaking hips on black and white screens. And everywhere you look, someone is waving a freshly laundered dollar bill like a badge of post-war pride. But something's different. There's a breeze blowing in from overseas, a quiet pressure building under the surface of that polished optimism. You notice it first in a French newspaper whispers that too many dollars are being printed, that the United States might not have enough gold to back it all up, that maybe the emperor's robes are more cotton blend than royal silk. And you're not alone in wondering. By the 1960s, foreign governments are watching America's spending habits with raised eyebrows and growing skepticism. Wars cost money. So do highways, space races, and global military bases. The U.S. prints dollars to cover it all, but under the J.D. Bretton Woods system. Each of those dollars is still technically redeemable for gold. That's the deal. 1 ounce of gold while saying $35, no exceptions. But now the numbers aren't adding up. You travel to France where Charles de Gaulle isn't shy about calling America out. He actually starts demanding gold in exchange for France's dollars. Real gold. Not promises. You watch crates of greenbacks get shipped across the Atlantic and swapped for heavy bullion. It's like an awkward high-stakes return policy at a store that doesn't want to honor its refund. And here's the quirky twist: the U.S. complies. At first, but it's not sustainable. Too many countries are asking. Too much gold is leaving. You stand in a room at the New York Fed where bars of gold are being quietly stacked into armored trucks heading to Europe. Each departure is like a slow leak in a golden balloon. Historians still argue whether America was printing recklessly or merely keeping up with its new role as global leader. But by 1971, it no longer matters. Because that's when President Richard Nixon makes the most seismic money move in modern history. On a sleepy Sunday in August, you lean in close to a television as Nixon clears his throat and says it. I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. You blink. Did he just say temporarily? He did. But that temporary move becomes permanent. And just like that, the gold standard, already a rickety illusion, is gone. No more swaps, no more redemptions, no more precious metal anchors. The dollar is now pure fiat. You hold one up to the light. It looks the same, feels the same. But everything underneath has changed. It is no longer backed by anything physical. It's backed by belief in the U.S. economy, in its institutions, in its ability to not completely lose control of the printing press. And remarkably, it works. Markets wobble sure. Some gold bugs scream betrayal, but the system holds. Foreign banks continue using dollars. Oil is still priced in dollars. Global trade still hums in green ink. The petrodollar becomes king, binding America's currency to energy markets and ensuring its place at the center of global finance. You walk into a store in 1975 and realize something magical. Nobody talks about gold anymore. The dollar has become self-sustaining. Like a paper sun glowing not because of what it's made of, but because of how many other systems orbit around it. Quirky fact for your nighttime trivia bank after the gold window closed: the U.S. kept producing silver certificates until the late 60s. You could walk into a bank with a silver certificate and technically get silver. But by the time Nixon dropped the hammer, most people didn't even try. The paper had become the point, and it wasn't just the substance, it was the cabin design. During the 60s and 70s, U.S. currency design gets one of its biggest facelifts. You see the bills morph into sleek, standardized layouts, clear fonts, consistent color schemes, security threads. The Federal Reserve seal becomes the central symbol of legitimacy. You begin to notice that the words on bills are more important than what they're backed by. In God We Trust appears prominently for the first time in 1957, replacing any mention of gold or silver. It's spiritual, symbolic, and in a way strategic. If not gold, then faith. If not metal, then meaning. You walk through the decades and watch the dollar do what no one expected it to do. Survive everything. Oil shocks, war spending, inflation surges, recessions. It wobbles, yes, but it never shatters. Because even when the gold is gone, the belief system remains. The dollar becomes language. It's how countries talk, how crises are managed, how decisions are made. Foreign governments start stockpiling them. Central banks measure their reserves in them. Even international criminals prefer them. Why? Because they work. You travel to Tokyo, then Berlin, then Cairo, and in every airport, the same booth waits for you. Currency exchange, we buy US dollars. That's when it hits you. This piece of paper in your hand is no longer just American, it's global. It's the language of trade, of diplomacy, of power. Not because it glitters, but because the world agreed, this is what money looks like. You drift into the 1980s and right away you hear the clatter of computers, the buzz of stock tickers, and the unmistakable thump of synth pop on a Walkman. Welcome to the decade of big shoulders and bigger debt, where the dollar dons a pinstripe suit and goes full Wall Street. You walk through Lower Manhattan and see it everywhere, the rise of money culture. People talk about IPOs at brunch clip coupons during recessions and obsess over interest rates, like they're horoscopes. The dollar, once a quiet companion in your wallet, is now the main character in America's new economic drama. And at the center of this drama is one man, Paul Volcker. You watch him hunch behind a desk at the Federal Reserve, a towering figure with a coffee mug large enough to drown a raccoon. He's not here to make friends. He's here to slay inflation. Because during the late 1970s, inflation had gone full wildfire. Prices spiraled, savings eroded, and dollars weakened so badly that people started investing in beanie babies of their era gold farmland and literally barrels of oil. It was bad. Really bad. So Volcker does the unthinkable. He hikes interest rates through the roof. You walk into a bank in 1981 and nearly faint, son. Mortgage rates are at 18%. Extra roll note. A car loan. Forget it. The dollar may be stable now, but borrowing it feels like pawning your future. People are furious. Builders stop building. Home buyers vanish. Small businesses fold, but slowly, painfully. The dollar begins to regain its strength. Inflation drops, confidence returns, and Volcker, grumpy as ever, becomes a kind of reluctant economic folk hero. Historians still argue whether he went too far too fast or just far enough. But one thing's clear, the dollar learns to flex its muscles. In this decade, it's not just a symbol of value, it creates policy. It's the tool that shapes behavior. And that tool gets sharper in the 80s and 90s, because this is when the world begins to embrace the idea of floating currencies. Remember Bretton Woods? Yeah, by now that's a fossil. Most countries have unhooked their money from gold from fixed exchange rates from any illusion of permanence. You float into a London currency exchange where screens flash live values every second. The dollar rises, then falls, then rises again. It dances, flirts, flails. It's no longer chained to shiny rocks in Fort Knox. It's surfing global sentiment. And here's your quirky moment of the night in 1985 after years of the dollar crushing. Every other currency, the U.S. joins an international group in the Paddy Plaza, a court of wire, a rare move to deliberately weaken the dollar. You read that again. Yes, as weaken the I-9, I it. Why? Because too much strength hurts. Exports. Other countries can't compete. So global leaders come together like the Avengers of macroeconomics and essentially say, okay, let's turn the dollar down a notch. And it works. The dollar cools off. International trade rebalances. For a little while at least. You wander into the 1990s and see a new kind of confidence blooming. The Cold War is over. Capitalism won. And with it, the dollar. It floods newly opened markets in Eastern Europe. It becomes the unofficial second currency in Latin America. In some places, it becomes the only currency. You walk through a shop in Argentina or cafe in Vietnam, and the owner quotes prices in US dollars, not their own national currency. The dollar doesn't conquer it, not to seduce this. It's designed practically unchanged since the 20s. That same greenish tint, that same stern George Washington. But now, people start noticing the security flaws. Counterfeiting is back, baby. Especially one flavor, the super note. That's the nickname given to a terrifyingly good counterfeit $100 bill. So good that even bank machines had trouble spotting them. Rumored to originate from rogue regimes, North Korea, maybe the supernote triggers a wave of upgrades. You step into the Bureau of Engraving and Printing in the mid-90s, and it smells like fresh ink and panic. Designers are adding color-shifting ink-embedded threads, watermarks, microprinting, basically turning the dollar into Fort Knox with a mustache. But here's the kicker that people don't like change. When the new $20 bill comes out in 1998 with peach tints and a big weird portrait of Andrew Jackson, some folks are convinced it's fake on purpose. Conspiracy theories swirl. Talk shows buzz. One man even refuses to accept it at his diner, insisting that's monopoly money. Still, the changes stick. The dollar becomes harder to fake, easier to trust, and slightly more colorful. But just slightly. Not like those wild euros or flashy Canadian bills. No, the US dollar stays mostly green, because green feels familiar. You hold a brand new $100 bill and a dusty one from 1950. Side by side, they feel like generations of the same stubborn family. The message is clear. I'm still here. The digital age is approaching fast. .coms rise. Email pings replace fax beeps. But the paper dollar holds on defiantly analog in a pixelated world. You watch it pass from hand to hand, from taxi drivers to politicians, from tourists to teenagers, and you realize it's more than a tool. It's a ritual, something deep and tactile and human. No battery required. You slip into the 2000s, that jittery turn of the century where people are simultaneously partying, like it's 1999 and panic buying canned beans, because maybe all the computers are going to explode at midnight. Spoiler, they don't. The Y2K bug turns out to be a hiccup, not an apocalypse. But the new millennium brings real changes, some exciting, some catastrophic, and the dollar rides every wave like a very nervous surfer with great hair. First, the economy surges. You walk into a tech startup in a dusty garage and watch a kid in flip-flops raise $10 million to build an app that does something. Nobody's quite sure. But the money flows like champagne, and the .com bubble money taste inflates until it becomes a gleaming digital blimp. Then it pops! The early 2000s kick off with recession, yes, in layoffs. And the sudden realization that not every company with a lowercase e in its name is a good idea. Still, the dollar holds steady, its value bolstered by habit, by history, and by the fact that there isn't really anything else waiting to take its place. You look around the globe, euros are new and exciting, but still a teenager. The yuan is locked down tight. Bitcoin doesn't exist yet, and so the dollar remains the world's favorite old shoe. Worn maybe, but reliable. Then comes September 11th, 2001. You're standing in a quiet crowd watching smoke rise from lower Manhattan. The air is thick with ash, and the mood shifts across the country from profit to war protection. The US dollar, once a symbol of carefree capitalism, becomes something more serious, something defensive. You hear phrases like safe haven currency. People around the world start moving assets into dollars, not out. Because in moments of global fear, the dollar becomes more than money. It becomes shelter. Historians still debate whether the US overcorrected in its post-9/11 policies, whether the balance between safety and spending spiraled too far. What's undeniable is the government opens the fiscal floodgates. Wars, defense budgets, new departments, new agencies. And through it all, the dollar keeps flowing. The Federal Reserve steps up its role again, cutting interest rates to near zero to keep money moving. You walk into a bank and see mortgage rates lower than your childhood allowance. Borrowing becomes cheap. Risk attractive. Which brings you to the next big break, 2008. You're now watching Lehman Brothers collapse like a sandcastle at high tide. The global financial crisis isn't just an American problem, it becomes an earthquake with aftershocks from Iceland to Indonesia. Banks fall, stocks tumble, and once again, trust is shattered. But here's the twist. Even in the middle of the storm, people still want dollars. You walk through international markets and they're scrambling for greenbacks. Why? Because the US government, for all its blunders, can still issue debt and print money with impunity. You see the shop Treasury Department auctioning off bonds like hotcakes, and everyone's buying. China, Europe, your weird uncle, everybody. Quirky fact in 2009. Zimbabwe issues a $100 trillion note. Yes, 100,000, that's Zimbabwe dollars. And yet, in corner markets across Harare, people are still using old tattered ikikid, U-5 bills made to buy bread. Why? Because even a worn-out George Washington is more stable than hyperinflated fantasy paper. You step into the heart of the response to the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing. A fancy term for let's inject trillions of digital dollars into the system and hope it doesn't catch fire. It's risky, bold, unprecedented, and it works sort of. The markets bounce, banks survive. But it sets the stage for a new era of money, where dollars are less printed and more conjured, where spreadsheets matter more than presses, and where digital liquidity that becomes the new reality, which leads us to the quiet revolution humming in the background. You're in a coffee shop in 2010. Someone behind you pays with a black plastic card, well, not cash. No big deal. But then someone else taps their phone. Then a teenager sends money through a new app. No bills, no coins, just invisible pulses of dollar data. Cashless living is here. And yet the physical dollar survives. It clings to pockets, to vending machines, to grandmas everywhere. In some places, rural towns, off-the-grid communities, it's still king. You hear someone say, I don't trust cards. I want to see my money. And you get it. There's something irreplaceable about holding a dollar. The crinkle, the linen texture, the faint metallic tang, a tactile ritual, a reminder that even in a digital age, money still wants to be touched. But as digital tools rise, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, even early crypto experiments, the odd dollar itself begins to split. There's the paper dollar, iconic and stubborn, and the high digital dollar, so invisible but everywhere. You check your bank account and the number feels real. But is it? It's just pixels, a digital promise. You haven't held cash in weeks, maybe months, but you still call it dollars. That's the magic. The US dollar becomes a shapeshifter as paper when you want it, code when you need it. Its identity no longer depends on what it's made of, but on what it can do. It survives not because it's perfect, but because it adapts awkwardly sometimes. Cautiously, but always forward. And so as the decade ends, you realize something strange. Despite all the crashes, all the debt, all the digital disruption, the dollar hasn't disappeared. It's everywhere. Stronger than ever. Still leading global trade. Still stashed under mattresses from Miami to Manila. And the world's still watching it. Still trusting it. Still betting on its next move. You blink and it's 2020, and just like that, the world stops. You're standing in a grocery store staring at empty shelves, masked strangers, and signs taped to cash registers that say, no coins. Card only, please. Outside, the streets are eerily quiet. Inside your pocket, your wallet feels irrelevant. Welcome to the Baditsasadalist pandemic economy, where the US dollar faces one of the strangest tests in its history. Not war, not inflation, not recession, but a Yimamalaha global freeze. At first, everything breaks. Millions lose jobs, stores close, flights are grounded. It's as if the gears of capitalism simply jammed overnight. And just as quickly, the government hits the switch. Stimulus checks, unemployment expansions, rent relief. Trillions of dollars are suddenly in play. You check your bank account. There it is, a deposit labeled Iris Trees 310 Ys. For some, it's a lifeline. For others, an unexpected bonus. And for the government, a bold gamble. Because now, for the first time in modern memory, most Americans receive cash from the government directly. No conditions, no strings. Just, here's some money, try to hang on. Historians still debate whether this massive cash injection saved the economy or supercharged inflation. Either way, it marked a psychological shift. People who never thought of the dollar as flexible suddenly saw it bend, stretching beyond what was once considered possible. And with it comes a realization that physical dollar is fading fast. You walk through the wreckage of a lockdown life. Restaurants now say tap to pay. Cashiers glance warily at bills. Your phone buzzes every time money moves. Apps like Yan Cash, App Yes, and Venmo become second nature. Even small businesses now accept cards or QR codes, and coins scarce. Almost mythical. The Chiake Maiki coin shortage of 2020 becomes a running joke and a real logistical headache. But it's not just about hygiene. It's about speed, trust, and convenience. You can't hand a 20 through a Zoom meeting. You hike and split rent via PayPal without ever leaving bed. Quirky twist of the pandemic era. Dogecoin. Yes, the meme coin born from a Shiba Inu joke on Reddit becomes a legitimate contender, at least in headlines. And behind the scenes, the US government starts quietly exploring its own response. The kind of digital dollar. You lean in as financial officials start using new words. CBDC, or central bank digital currency. The idea create a version of the dollar that lives natively in the digital world, issued not by private banks but by the Federal Reserve itself. Like cash but online, no card companies, no middlemen. You imagine the possibilities: instant payments from government to citizen, smart money that expires, programmable aid, tax refunds that land in seconds, and also the fear surveillance, control, fragility. This isn't just a new kind of payment, it's a whole new architecture. One that could either revolutionize Tani or destabilize Kona, everything you know about money. But as the idea simmers in think tanks and Senate hearings, something else simmers too. Inflation? You walk into a store in 2022 and a single stick of butter costs more than your childhood bike. Gas prices spike. Rent soars. Even fast food menus quietly lose their dollar options. The dollar menu becomes the "you're lucky it's under 3" menu. And suddenly everyone's talking about the value weights of the dollar. Not just what it can buy, but how fast that power is eroding. The Federal Reserve tightens. Again, interest rates rise, markets wobble, and the dollar it gets even stronger on the global stage. Why? Because in times of chaos, it remains the go-to safe haven, even if it's less loved at home. You zoom out. Across the globe, central banks stockpile dollars. Oil contracts are still priced in dollars. International loans, global trade, financial reserves, all still orbit around this green piece of linen. But something is shifting. You meet people who've never touched a dollar bill. Gen Z kids with Apple Pay teens investing in stocks via Robinhood students paid in digital tokens for freelance work. To them, the dollar isn't paper, it's pixels. And maybe that's okay, because the dollar has never really been about what it's made of. Not gold, not silver, not even linen and ink. It's about what it represents. A promise. One that stretches across wars, panics, bubbles, memes, and bailouts. You think back to that first chaotic patchwork of currencies in the 1700s. You remember the goats and the Civil War notes. You remember Lincoln's beard, Nixon's gold gamble, Volcker's coffee, the crinkle of old bills, the sparkle of new ones. And now, you hold your phone screen up to the light, you tap send. You watch a number move, and you realize this, whatever this is still the dollar. Not because it's perfect, but because somehow it's still here. You step cautiously into the 2020s where money is everywhere but somehow still invisible. You sit in a coffee shop watching a teenager buy a drink with a key wrist flick. Yeah, and someone across the room receive a paycheck via email. No wallets, no coins. Just pulses of data whizzing through the air like caffeinated fireflies. And above it all, like a sleepy giant, perched on a very creaky throne sits the US dollar heap. Still dominant, still trusted, still weirdly paper, at least for now. Because the world is finally starting to ask the question that's been simmering for decades. What if the dollar isn't forever? You attend a global finance summit, virtually of course, and hear anxious whispers de-dollarization. That's the buzzword of the moment. Countries like China and Russia are brokering oil deals in yuan. New digital payment networks are forming. There are murmurs of regional currencies, gold-backed tokens, even just blockchain-based trade systems that bypass the dollar entirely. It's not an overnight collapse. It's a slow, subtle shift. Like tectonic plates under a calm sea. You can't see the movement, but you feel it. Still, here's the irony as these shifts happen. The dollar's short-term power only grows. You watch in real time as economic crises, war in Ukraine, rising interest rates, debt ceiling standoffs, trigger a surge in demand for US dollars. Again, people across the world still treat it like financial oxygen. And that's the strange magic of the dollar, no matter how much people criticize it. No matter how many alternatives emerge, but they still run back to it when the world shakes. And why? Because the dollar isn't just a currency. It's a Tao narrative. A shared global story about trust, strength, predictability, and the promise that even if things fall apart, the United States will still be standing there. Printing, borrowing, repaying, regulating, doing something. Historians still argue whether this dominance is sustainable or merely inherited from a 20th century legacy. But for now, you watch central banks quietly increase their dollar reserves. You watch oil futures still priced in green. You see migrant workers sending remittances in U.S. funds because that's what their families trust. But back home, that story is being rewritten. In cities across the U.S., cashless businesses are no longer an exception, they're the norm. You visit a trendy salad bar in Los Angeles and spot a sign, "No cash accepted." Someone tries to tip a barista with a crumpled dollar and the barista shrugs. "Sorry, we're Venmo only." And while the elderly clutch their bills like talismans, the young increasingly see physical cash as antique. Romantic, maybe, aesthetically pleasing, but not practical. You wander into a school where kindergartners are learning about money through apps, not piggy banks. A teacher holds up a $10 bill and one child says, "Is that like a coupon?" But even as the tactile fades, the calm symbolism grows. You pass through neighborhoods where the dollar bill has become a design element printed on shirts, tattoos, street art. It's no longer just currency, it's iconography. It's Andy Warhol. It's protest graffiti. It's a filter on capitalism, power, and possibility. Quirky tidbit. There's an entire online movement of artists who deface dollar bills into micro masterpieces. Tiny landscapes, political satire, George Washington in clown makeup. It's technically illegal, but the government mostly just shrugs. Even they know that these little experiments are signs of cultural life, not threats. And speaking of threats, digital currency competition is heating up. You sit through a Senate hearing on the Digital Dollar Project, where economists, tech experts, and slightly confused senators debate what it means for the U.S. to finally create an official, blockchain-based currency. Not crypto, not speculative, but a true government-issued digital dollar. And this time it feels real. Pilot programs begin. Simulations run. You see a possible future where your phone holds a Fed wallet, preloaded with programmable dollars usable, instantly traceable precisely, and maybe even expirable. That idea unsettles you. Because while digital dollars offer speed, efficiency, and broader access, they also invite questions. Who controls the code? Who watches the flow? Can your money be frozen with a keystroke? The dollar has always walked a fine line between power and privacy, freedom and control. A line that's now being redrawn in real time. And yet, through all this digital frenzy, one thing stays oddly consistent: the paper bill. You return to Washington, D.C. and visit the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, where presses still thunder away like steampunk monsters. You watch new $100 bills roll out crisp, blue-striped, security-enhanced, and you realize they're still printing billions of them. Because while the future may be contactless and coded, the past still clings to linen and ink. Some habits die slow. You hold a dollar up to the light. The watermark shimmers. The fibers glow faintly. And for just a moment, you feel the weight of every era, every crisis, every promise this bill has survived. It's not just paper, it's history. And you wonder, as the world races ahead, will future generations look back at this strange, persistent rectangle of trust and laugh? Or will they miss the days when money could be held, folded, tucked inside a shoe, or left behind in a birthday card? Maybe both. Because whether printed or programmed, whispered or wired, the story of the dollar isn't over. It's just getting an upgrade. You stand at the edge of now. The dollar is still here, still folded into wallets, still flickering on screens, still the strange heartbeat behind everything from lemonade stands to missile contracts. But you feel it in your bones. Something is shifting. Fast. You step into a bank, not the marbled, towering kind from the 1920s, but a sleek glass and touchscreen version. There are no tellers, no cash drawers, just screens. You tap a few buttons, check your balance, and walk out without touching a single bill. Because more and more, you don't need to ask. The US dollar, the symbol, the system, the story, is rapidly transforming from a physical object into a living algorithm. Let's rewind just for contrast. You remember those early greenbacks, the demand notes printed during the Civil War, backed by almost nothing except Lincoln's reputation and America's shaky hopes? They were ugly, fragile, easily counterfeited, but they were real. You could drop them, burn them, tuck them in a boot. Now, your dollar might never exist outside the cloud. You send it with a tap. You split dinner with a swipe. You buy groceries from a refrigerator that charges your bank without you ever touching your wallet. It's magic or surveillance. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Historians still argue whether this is a golden era of access or the beginning of the end for monetary privacy. And yeah, there's reason to wonder. You attend a tech conference where fintech startups pitch new ways to make money smarter. You hear things like programmable payments with time locks, geofenced spending, AI-adjusted microcredit based on real-time biometrics. You nod slowly. But part of you just misses when $5 was $5, and the only thing it tracked was the grime on your hands. After it passed through 12 strangers in a pizza joint, yet here we are. In a time when the value mind of money feels more psychological than ever, where the meaning mind of money is being renegotiated daily, and no place is that more clear than in the world of crypto. You walk into a blockchain convention and hear passionate arguments. The dollar is dead. Bitcoin is freedom. Decentralize everything. But step back and you'll notice something funny. Even the loudest crypto evangelists still measure everything in US dollars. Bitcoin's worth still stated in USD. Ethereum's growth priced in greenbacks. Market crashes assessed in how many dollars people lost. The dollar remains the yardstick, so even as the world builds its ladders around it. You scroll through the Reddit TikTok, financial subcultures memes about inflation jokes, about vibing with your overdraft screenshots of $600 rent from 2003. And always beneath the humor, a thread of anxiety. What does a dollar even mean anymore? Because let's be honest, it's complicated. Inflation eats away at value. Wages lag behind prices. A 20 today buys what 10 used to. Or less. You watch young adults tipping baristas with phone apps, buying fractional shares of stocks, investing in joke coins, flipping sneakers for rent money. The hustle economy thrives, and the dollar becomes both enabler and adversary. And yet, you still need it. Landlords ask for it. Taxes demand it. Your grandma slips it into birthday cards. The dollar might feel slippery, but it's woven into your reality. To law language identity. You visit countries where the dollar is still more trusted than the local currency. You see people line up at currency exchanges not for souvenirs, but for survival. In nations teetering on economic collapse, a single US 20 bill might can feed a family for a week or save a life. That power, that global weight, still unmatched. Quirky reality over Nasadu, 80% of US dollars now exist outside the United States. Not in vaults, not even in wallets. Just out there. Circulating, moving, believed in. You picture it like a ghost network. A constellation of promises backed by little more than faith, inertia, and a collective shrug that says, hey, it still works. But where does it go next? You take one last walk through time. Past the cotton paper factories, past FDR's gold ban, past Nixon's smirk, past Reagan's big wallets and Clinton's .coms and Bernanke's helicopter money and Powell's inflation charts. You walk through digital storm clouds, through crypto winters, through viral TikToks about how to stretch $3 for a week. You keep walking. And ahead, you see the central bank digital currency becoming real. A new digital dollar issued directly by the US government. Instantly sent. Instantly tracked. No bank middlemen, no ATMs, just code and confidence. For some, it's the ultimate convenience. For others, a nightmare of surveillance. But for you, it's another evolution. Another strange chapter in a book that started with scraps of hand-stamped notes and a desperate dream of unity. You hold that idea in your mind. The dollar not a thing, but a journey. Not a piece of paper, but a shared agreement. This means something. It meant freedom. It meant control. It meant lunch. It meant debt. It meant power. It meant help. It meant hope. And even now, through all its changes, all its cracks, all its futures, the dollar still rests quietly in your digital pocket, waiting. On a wind down begins below. Now let your shoulders drop. You've walked across centuries tonight through war revolution boardrooms, bank vaults, and virtual clouds. The US dollar has carried more than just value. It's carried history, identity, and contradiction. A symbol both ordinary and massive. Both fragile and enduring. You're still holding it in a way, not in your hand, but in your life. In the world around you, on every price tag, every receipt, every hopeful budget scribbled on a napkin. It's more than money, it's memory. So as you close your eyes, picture it drifting gently now, an old worn bill tumbling through a breeze, floating past farmers, soldiers, shopkeepers, presidents, and finally into your palm. Soft, simple, familiar. You fold it once, tuck it into your pocket, and breathe out. Whatever tomorrow brings, new apps, new currencies, new crises, the dollar story will be right there with you. Not perfect, not permanent, but still here, still whispering. This means something. Good night. By end of script. Sweet dreams.
you.